Hi, this is Danielle Mundele from the OpenStack UX team. In this presentation, I'll be talking a bit about the findings from the Cloud Architect Information Needs Study. So first, a little bit about the impact of this research. So most of the research that is done on OpenStack in the user experience group is mostly focused on cloud operators. And there are some similarities between operators and architects, namely that they're both having a focus on research in a broad context. But architects do have a unique perspective. They're looking for knowledge about how cloud platforms work and to be able to recommend that solution to a company that is either looking to move toward cloud or for a new cloud solution. So a lot of times the opinions of cloud architects sort of makes them a gatekeeper to access to a particular cloud platform. So if we understand how they perceive different platforms while they're researching a solution, this can help impact the adoption of OpenStack, because sometimes if there's a poor experience in getting started with a proof of concept, etc., that may be preventable. And so having them have a better experience with OpenStack would definitely benefit the adoption. So to talk broadly about some of the main findings that occurred in the research, what we learned was that cloud architects have this sort of tribal knowledge aspect to the role. So there's sort of this implicit or tacit understanding of cloud platforms, which they use to sort of justify a solution given a certain set of requirements needed for that solution. So typically this information is something that they gain from past experience recommending cloud platforms, or something that they're sharing with their team and learning from there. This isn't really something that you could just look up on a website to find out. So in the cases where they do need just a one-off quick information on some technical specifications, that stuff is found on the web. But the main focus of what architects are really trying to get at is how the capabilities for their solution will be met by a certain platform. And to do this, they really need to understand those requirements and also the environment that they'll be working in. So for example, they're asking questions like, well, can this particular cloud platform do something because we need a specific feature? Or perhaps, does this solution that's very easy to use but doesn't hit all of our requirements, is that a better decision than maybe something that 100% satisfies those requirements but is difficult or hard to get started with? So all in all, the architects working on cloud solutions are going to be looking for information that supplements their broader knowledge of cloud platforms. So having case studies or reading opinion pieces from other architects helps them share the knowledge from that experience and build on that for their future cloud recommendations. Here's a little bit about the methodology that we used. So again, our goal is to just understand how architects are finding and using information to do their job to recommend a cloud platform. So the method we used was semi-structured interviews with individual participants. And these lasted around an hour. And we talked about things, first just trying to understand their process, how they actually go about the whole cloud recommendation procedure, and how they're getting their information, and what information do they need, what can't they find, things like that. Some influencing factors that weigh in when they're making their decision, and how to improve their information gathering, and what types of information would help them with their recommendations. We talked to 6 people, and they represented a mix of roles. We had people that were part of software teams, some in a more manager role, and other people that were, more towards the implementation, and also consultants, people who were hired by an external company to come in and identify their gaps and help their team with the solution. So all of these people had the similarities that they had experience in proposing a new cloud solution. And the interesting thing about that was that only 3 of them had a title related to cloud architecture. And we're learning that titles and people's roles don't really correspond to the work that they're actually doing most of the time. This slide goes into a bit more detail about what happened during each session. Like I said, we started with background information just to understand where they're coming from, and then got more specific about cloud architecture and understanding the process that they go through, what that looks like. And then we focused on cloud knowledge. So where is their knowledge coming from, and how are they using it? How does it influence their decisions? And finally, we wrapped up by talking about what things might help them. What is an ideal way to learn more about cloud platforms, and answered any questions and addressed comments that they had as well. On this slide, you'll also see the persona description for cloud architects in OpenStack. You can read more about the other OpenStack personas via the link at the bottom of the slide. This next section will dive a bit deeper into some of the main findings that surfaced through the research. So overall, the information was most important for architects to really understand how they're going to best meet the requirements that they need to satisfy with this new cloud solution. And understanding those requirements really is more important than the technical details about, what's actually going to get implemented. So having a clear idea of the usage of the cloud and, how it fits into a company is important to know up front, especially for consultants who aren't normally a part of that company. For example, they might be asking questions like, what does the current solution already in place look like? And if it's cloud, where are the gaps in their current platform? What types of applications are being deployed, and how are they going to be best supported by a cloud platform? In doing research, we heard from participants that this was something that they just did as they went along. It wasn't like a waterfall approach where they did heads down, finding all the information that they can possibly find, and only then think about recommending a solution. It was something that changed scope as they talked to more people. A variety of stakeholders are often involved. And that's important to make sure everybody's needs and perspectives are captured by the architect so that they come up with the best solution for everybody. The process was largely guided by gaps in existing systems. So trying to solve an existing problem with a new platform. And that may be shifting to a different cloud platform, or just getting more up to date and implementing a cloud solution to be more current. So in that, the sophistication of the state of cloud technologies was often a factor in how solutions were scoped. So for example, when cloud was sort of in its infancy, people were, motivated to move to the cloud because they wanted to leverage that technology and move away from more traditional solutions. And in more recent times, we had a few participants who had worked on cloud architecture within the past year. They mentioned that there was less advocating for the cloud, that people already wanted to use cloud technology, and the focus was finding the best solution for those particular needs. Oftentimes, a starting place was to understand who the industry leaders are. And a few participants mentioned Gartner, and that actually influenced their recommendations on what platforms they would recommend. One participant, as you can see in the quote on this page, said that it was a bigger factor in the decision than he expected. So really knowing what is out there and what is well supported drives the cloud architect's decision. So some strategies that were suggested to improve how architects do their job. Really, they're looking for functional information. They want to know what works in certain scenarios and also what doesn't work. This adds to their background knowledge, and it would help them come to solutions faster. And this is particularly important for consultants who are relying on that past experience and a wide variety of projects to know what would be reasonable to recommend. And also just having a way for cloud architects to have a method of communication and learn maybe that there's someone else trying to solve a similar problem that they can talk to and bounce ideas off of while they're working. Another way that would improve architects' experience is to understand the people who will be using this cloud solution. So understand more about the needs of developers and understanding domain knowledge deeper than perhaps just a hackathon level of understanding how apps work, especially in the context of commercial apps, if this is an enterprise cloud solution. So they're just trying to understand best how the cloud's being used. Finally, having information that is required for them to make their recommendations already collected is going to make the process much easier. Often, participants mentioned that a company might not have tracked their data and they may not know what their current metrics are in the case of what their workload looks like or their storage capacity. So before engaging an architect, tools in order to have that architect better understand the current environment. Moving on, we have some additional findings of topics that we covered in the interviews. For example, what's going into the actual decision-making point when the research is done. And as you might expect, several factors are influencing that decision, but when a decision is about to be made, it's really only a comparison between perhaps only two platforms that are seriously being considered. So one way that architects come to this decision, which may only include two options, is that existing architecture scopes their decision, and they're also going to want to understand what's already in place in order to make this transition smooth. So if a company has an existing relationship, let's say with Microsoft, in other areas that aren't cloud related, they might be more willing to consider cloud solutions from that company, and it might be easier for them to migrate. However, on the other hand, this also might narrow down their solutions to the point where it may only be that there's one workable solution. And when faced with this challenge, participants said that, they're always going to think about options. And even if they aren't, the most streamlined option, that they're always going to present it as another thing to consider. Other factors are obviously going to include cost, whether it's allowing automation, and also a bit about what's popular. Where's the buzz or hype around a particular cloud platform? And as we mentioned before, knowing who the industry leaders is really going to drive the decision, because it shows that it's easy, other people have done it, so why shouldn't we try it as well? In deploying these platforms, this is a significant role in making that platform decision. Even if architects weren't really involved at the implementation step of sort of transitioning into the recommendation that they made, others said that they're really trying to get that hands-on experience to understand how that platform can be used before they've committed to it. And if it's easy to learn, easy to get started with, it's only going to make that decision easier for that cloud platform. And in order to do this, often a proof of concept was set up. And this isn't just your average test environment. A lot of the participants we spoke with said that they act as if their proof of concept is actually in production, and they're trying to get a real life of experience of how that's going to act. So you can see in the quote here, one participant said that they weren't just, playing around, seeing what worked. They actually had, a sort of internal customer within their enterprise company, and they helped them move over to the new platform and kind of learned how it might scale in the future when it went into production. In managing their information, one interesting thing we found is that there's a lot of information that's being transferred, being gathered, a lot of different factors playing into the cloud platform solution decision, but not always is this being formally written down or captured. Really, just we heard from one person who manages multiple clients at a time in his consultant role, says that he keeps records just to keep everything straight. But others said that they just kind of write notes to themselves or discuss things at team meetings, and that's how they share information. And I found this particularly interesting because one of the things that participants said that would help their work is if they had, an understanding of other architects' experiences. So it would be beneficial for them to capture their experience and share that with others. And one thing that helps scope and narrow down their solutions is this business constraints. So they may know right off the bat that a certain platform isn't going to work given what they need to do. So that cuts down on the amount of information that they would need if they were going to start considering all platforms as an equal opportunity for their recommendation. So they're not typically putting together detailed reports. And if they do need to get some minor detail, for example, if they want to know if a certain platform has supports a certain feature, they might just do a quick Google search to find that information. And generally, those one-off things are easy to find. So in terms of how much time research is making up of the whole cloud architect process, it's very important to have that information, but it's really not most of the time spent throughout the whole process. So most of the participants said that at the beginning of the project, research is very important because you have to think about the capabilities of certain platforms and either count them in towards your solution or rule them out. So especially when cloud was not as well known at the time, there was obviously more research that people had to do to fully understand it. But nowadays often this research is intensive, but it's still a small piece in the overall process. In fact, maintaining and customizing the proof of concept was actually the thing that took the most time. So this hands-on experience is very critical to cloud architects because they're trying to understand how the platform's going to work in production. And to do that, they might need to build patches or spend time just understanding the inner workings of that during their proof of concept phase. And as you can see from the quote, this may take quite a while. In this case, participants saying it would take 6 to 9 months just to evaluate that proof of concept. And they may have multiple proof of concepts to look at. Wrapping up today, we have a few potential solutions that may help cloud architects. So overall, we learned that community learning approaches are going to be best for sharing experiences and having that tribal knowledge that architects rely on to make their decisions. So having access to opinions and recommendations from other architects was seen as beneficial. And this could be in multiple forms. It could be a blog, a forum, or maybe an email digest of knowing what kinds of problems are out there and how they were solved and what the scenario and environments look like. On that note, written use cases may also be helpful. So having a collection of case studies of understanding the type of solution for a particular company and how that scaled is important to understand as well. Finally, having more domain-specific knowledge about how clouds are actually used is going to be important to understand, some of the finer nuances between solutions. So having training that's more architect focused would help them understand what to focus on and how to get to their solutions faster. A lot of OpenStack training in particular is focused towards operators, so expanding towards architects may be beneficial. Also, just education about how applications are being deployed and how they're working helps architects better understand the people that they're serving and understands the requirements of the cloud platforms better. So that's everything that I have today. One thing that I found very interesting was that people's experiences varied a lot, and we did some research in information needs for operators, and it was challenging because you couldn't just ask some of the same questions to the architects. The role is quite different, and that was it was interesting and challenging to understand where the commonalities were in such different experiences. And another thing that really surprised me that I learned was that, in particular, when considering OpenStack, one architect got involved with the community to get a feel for how things were being developed and how the platform was progressing as a way to gauge its growth and its sophistication. So that was really cool too.